Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Find IDs training session. This is Olivia. I'm the Product Adoption Manager at CRM Fusion, and I'll be doing the session today. Today is a 1-hour class, again, just on Find IDs. Everybody is in listen-only mode, but if you guys have questions, I want you to be able to ask them. So I'm going to have you type in the questions into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. You should see that on the right-hand side. I'll give everybody a second to locate that. When you type in a question, I will read it out loud, provide the answer back so we can all benefit. And you don't have to wait for me to ask if there's questions. If something comes to you, just type it in. If it's not the right time for me to answer it, or if it's jumping ahead a little bit, don't worry about it. We'll find the time, the appropriate time to address it, and I'll make sure that every question that comes in gets addressed. So today we're going to go over, the ins and outs of Find IDs. We're going to talk a little bit about some deduping best practices. We'll briefly go over setting up conditions, but we're just going to talk about mainly, the different ways that you can run Find IDs to get what you want. So before we start talking about Find IDs, I do want to take a minute and just talk a little bit about the screen you're looking at here. You should be seeing my DemandTools screen. So I'm logged into a DemandTools instance, and at the top, if you're seeing an upgrade alert, that's an indication to you that you're not on the most current version, and you can be free of charge. All you have to do is download it and install it. Okay, so always a good idea to be on the most current version, and upgrades are always free. You'll also see the version listed here. So if you're not seeing an upgrade banner, then you should be seeing this version, the 270.36. The tiles down below here, of course, you've seen the middle one, which is the live training because you're here with me today. The one on the left is for self-help. That allows you to access the knowledge base and help documentation. And then the one on the right is to facilitate logging a case. This session is being recorded, so if anybody wants a recording, just click that tech support tile, log a case, and there is a case reason for recorded webinar way at the bottom. Okay. You can also access this page from our website, which is crmfusion.com under support, and then open a technical case. Okay, same form. Even for those of you, did I already say this, who don't qualify for technical support, go ahead and log a case there if you want a recorded webinar. We're always happy to send those links to you. Hopefully within the next couple months, we're going to have a way for you to just be able to go out to the web and grab those links instead of asking for it from us. So that's exciting. After today's training, you will be getting a survey. So if you have the time, we would appreciate if you would fill it out. We'd just like to know what we're doing right, where we could do things better, and just how you felt about the training in general. And of course, if you have any feedback about the product, you can put it in there, or you can log a separate case and just let us know your thoughts on that. If anybody has any questions before we get started, now would be a great time to ask those. And just to touch on the bottom portion of the screen, we've got social media stuff. So our latest tweets, how to stay in touch with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel, where you'll find some tutorial videos. Nothing quite as in-depth as the training, but hopefully we'll get those out there soon. I don't see anything coming in, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, Find IDs is listed over here on the left under Discovery. If you click on the white and green question mark, that will launch you to the Find IDs help pages. Okay, so of course you can get to the help docs a multitude of different ways, but this just takes you right into Find IDs. And then you've got your crumb trail here and the navigation menu to help you out. If you click on the words Find IDs, that'll launch the module. So before we start clicking around in here, let's just talk a little bit about what Find IDs is meant to do. It's a comparison tool, very simply put. It allows you to take an external spreadsheet of data and compare it to a table of data in Salesforce. And why you would do that, the reasons are up to you. So common reasons. People want to know, are there matches between the spreadsheet and Salesforce data prior to an import, so they're not importing duplicates? This is a fantastic tool for that. And you might be thinking, well, what about people import? People import is also great, but it is geared towards contact leads and secondarily accounts. Find IDs, you can work with any standard or custom object, so you have more flexibility here. Other times people will come to us and say, I have a list of email addresses and I have no other supporting detail for these emails. I don't know name or phone number or what account they're from. So you can use a spreadsheet like that to compare to, your leads or your contacts and say, wherever you find this email, pull me back the records that have it. Some people just need to get the IDs of the record, right? So you have a spreadsheet and you're like, I know these are in Salesforce, but I forgot to pull out the ID when I ran my report. And you can use that data, compare it through Find IDs, and pull back the ID. So the point is it's not always looking just for the record ID. It's to find matches between what's in your spreadsheet and the table you're looking at in Salesforce to get whatever information you want out of Salesforce for those records. So it's a pretty slick comparison tool. Now, it doesn't write anything into Salesforce. This is strictly compare the spreadsheet to the Salesforce data, give us the results, and then your option is to export that information. So if you're using this to see if there's matches and then to discern the non-matches as the ones you import, this would give you the export files for that. All right, so just compare and export is what we're doing here. We're going to walk through, I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 examples, probably just 2, but it'll depend on the questions that we get to. So I don't want to go too fast. I don't want to go too slow. I want to keep a good pace for you guys. If anybody thinks that I'm going too fast or too slow, go ahead and tell me. Mainly the too fast stuff. The too slow stuff, remember these are beginner classes, so if this is going over some things that you've heard before, sorry about that, but we try to drive the same points home so they stick. All right, the first example that we're going to run through, I just have a normal spreadsheet of data. Let me show it to you. And we're going to compare it to either the contact or lead table. Let's see what we've got in my documents here. All right, typical spreadsheet. Got address information, a company name, email, first name, last name, lead source, phone, website. So I could really take this spreadsheet for our example and compare it against accounts, contacts, or leads, even opportunities. If I wanted to say, all right, let's see if there's any opportunities associated to these accounts, I could do that. Just to keep things simple as we get started, let's just do a comparison to the let's do the contact table. And we're just going to see what matches we can find, okay? Now, this module is capable of utilizing the bulk API, but you are limited to just using CSV as your file type if you do that, and there's no preview of your results. Working with the bulk API is really meant for extremely large data sets. So you should be okay with how we're doing it here, but if you find that you're getting timeouts or it's not processing quickly enough, you may want to consider using bulk API. If you're not using bulk, you do have the flexibility of using different file types. So CSV included, CSV, Excel, XLSX, MDB, ACCDB. So wherever your comfort exists, you can probably find a file type to use here. To select the file for the job, on the right-hand side, click Select File. And then just navigate out on your computer to where it might be and grab it. If you're using Excel or Access, where you can have multiple worksheets in the workbook, it is going to request that you select the worksheet, even if there's only one. For CSV, worksheets are not applicable, so it'll just auto-load it for you. All right, you know what I have to do? I have to figure out which tab we want to use. Let's rename these so I know. Okay. Now, if you make any changes in your spreadsheet, and I just did a little one here, it's not with the data, but I want to show you that if you make any changes, specifically with the data, you're going to have to reload the spreadsheet into Find IDs, okay? Because you'll notice my worksheet names aren't loading up properly. So I'm going to reselect my file, and then there we go. Okay, and I can double click on the file or the worksheet that I want to use, or I can highlight it and click use. I kind of feel like that button's sort of over there in Neverland. In the red ink, after you load it, it tells you how many records are there. Then it wants to know what object in Salesforce are we comparing your spreadsheet against. And we chose contact. So I'll scroll down to my list, and you'll see, you've got all your standard and custom stuff. There we go. And then you click Use Object. The next thing it wants you to do is to select the fields of information you want brought back to you should we find a match for a record in your spreadsheet. So in other words, if we match a record in our spreadsheet to a record in Salesforce, what fields of information from that record in Salesforce do you want returned to you? I want the account ID. I also want the account name. Okay, for those of you not familiar, the plus signs are indicating table joins. So you can expand those and grab fields of information from related tables. You're not restricted to just the ID of the record. You can actually get some more detailed information. And then I'm just going to grab some standard stuff like email, first, last, phone, and then some address information. Okay, and what you choose here is obviously up to you. And, we don't care what field you choose, how many, that's not always such a big issue, but if you start pulling in like 200 fields, it could become a bit cumbersome for the system. But the idea is not only to choose the fields that you want returned back to you, but also the fields that are helping you when you're looking and spot checking your data to ensure that the matches that you've returned are good matches, that you agree with them. Because we can set up our dupe criteria in such a way that it can return false positives. It is very dependent upon your data and what mapping types you use. And I'm going to grab phone, and I'll grab owner too. I'm going to grab the owner ID, and then I'll also grab the name. Now you'll notice I'm not choosing the contact ID field. The reason for that is because if whatever main table you're working in, we're automatically going to give you those record IDs. So if you ask for them, great. You don't have to though. All right, so it's not going to hurt anything if I chose ID, but it will also still be included should I not. Now over here on the right, you can rearrange your fields however you'd like, and it's just a quick drag and drop interface. I like to just clean up just so on my export, they're in a nice order for me. One other thing I wanted to point out here that I glazed over on when you're using CSV, some of us know, some of us might not, but CSV is not an innately UTF-8 encoded file. Not really such a big deal if you're not working with foreign characters, but if you are working with foreign characters, not allowing CSV to be read as UTF-8 will result in them looking like wingdings. So if you're using CSV, my suggestion is just to always read it as UTF-8 because it's a good encoding. It keeps everything sort of just the way it is, the way you see it. Okay, so let's just recap the first screen here and we'll move along to some of the more interesting stuff. Select your file with the Select File button. Choose your worksheet, should it be applicable. Select the object you want to compare your spreadsheet against, and then check off the fields for the data that you want returned to you if we find a match. Step 2 is where things get a bit more interesting. The top portion is asking you what records specifically in Salesforce do you want to compare again? So we said, contact data. Do you want all the records? And if you look over here on the right, we've got to use all, and then use conditions. I'm going to use conditions just so we can talk about how they work here for a minute. And you see how I get that little double arrow? I can give myself a little bit more real estate up there if I need to, and just sort of move this stuff around. I do not want to look at every single contact record. This data, I'm going to pretend came from an Ohio list, and so I'm going to say, let's just compare to things where the mailing state, choose my operator, exclamation point equal sign represents not equal to, but I want equals, and I'll do OH, a comma for or, no space after the comma, and then subsequent values, okay? And we'll throw PA in there because they're close by. Then I add the condition, and it's listed down here. Okay, bubble 5 is going to give you some blurbs about, no space after the comma. So some things that people typically forget, and then link to the help documentation that goes into conditions in depth. If you would like to remove a condition, you click this blue box to the left and then delete on your keyboard. If you're using a Mac, depending on your keyboard setup, you may have to click Function Delete. Now, if I want to have another condition, I can do that. And we'll say mailing city equals Cleveland or Pittsburgh. And you'll notice I'm typing in all lower because it is not case sensitive. So now these two conditions are ANDed to each other. And what that means is I'm only going to compare against data where the state is one of these three values and the city is one of these two. I can turn on expert mode and then open up the ORing. If conditions have the same OR group number, they are still ANDed to each other. It's not until they have different OR group numbers that they're actually ORed to one another. So the point is, just by turning this on doesn't actually OR anything, it just opens up the capability for you to OR it. To OR it, I can click here in the OR group and I can either type a 2 or use my directional arrows. And then if I click enter, it's put in its own group, and now these two conditions are ORed to one another. So I'll compare against contacts that are in the city of Cleveland or Pittsburgh, or I'll compare against states, contacts in one of these three states. For this example, I'm actually just going to keep it with state. I don't want to be too exclusive with my data. But there's a little information for you on working with conditions. Somebody was saying that their volume was really quiet, and I know from time to time my headset can do that, on just depending on phones that maybe it's not compatible with. So if anybody else is having a hard time hearing, let me know. I'll try to speak a little bit louder in case, GoToMeeting is just kind of muffling my voice a bit. All right, so then now that we know we're comparing against contacts, we know the fields we want brought back, we also know specifically which records we're comparing against. The bottom portion is diving into the detail on how we're going to compare our spreadsheet data to our Salesforce data. If anybody's familiar with the single table dedupe, what you're going to see here is very consistent with what's over there. That's essentially what we're doing, is we're little mini dedupe scenarios between a spreadsheet and Salesforce data. So the mapping types will be the same. The match logic will be the same, and we're going to go over that. But for those of you that have a reference point, you're going to be hearing a lot of familiar information. Before we do any sort of comparison of data, we like to remind ourselves that when we do the comparison through these steps, because you can have multiple steps that compare the data differently, we want to do that progression from a rigid scenario to a loose scenario. The first scenario that we push the data through should be your most rigid. It should find almost as exact matches. And it may not return many results. However, the results it does return, you're going to have a very high confidence level in, and you won't have to spot check those. So that's a supporting reason why we tell you, have multiple ways to analyze your data, because number one, it may not all match the same way. Some records may have certain fields filled out that other records don't. The way people enter data is always different, or what data source we get it from. So we have to accommodate for the differences in our data with multiple match steps, which is basically just multiple ways of analyzing the data and comparing it to find a good match. Now, anybody could probably find a match with data if they're like, oh, well, let's just match on the first name, last name. And you may have a step that does that. But before you do something like that, I would like to see you have a step that is a bit more meaty, where there's more fields to match on, more information to support that this is a really good match. It's a good idea here, if you haven't already thought about what a definition of a duplicate is in your database, to maybe sit down and do that now. Or if you are using things in a single table dedupe, you can probably mimic a lot of the settings that are working there over here. Let's build a step, and then I think the progression of what we're doing will be a little bit more clear. As we're going through this, I am going to talk about some of our data matching practices, just the defaults and how the system works. So if you have questions or if you get a little bit lost in this conversation, let me know, and I'll be sure to repeat whatever it is you need, or backtrack, or take the question offline if we have to. All right, so match step 1, and I can name these, and I'll just call this, I'm not going to name it yet. We'll name it after I put my fields in, because I think what I'm going to do is put this field, list them here. So when I look at my results, I can easily remember, okay, in that step, these are the fields of information I matched upon. On the lower left, I'm going to click Add Mapping Condition. And the input column, that is representative of the headers from my spreadsheet. The field to match, that's the Salesforce field. So for every condition, you have to have a field from your spreadsheet, the field that it should be compared against in Salesforce, and then the mapping type. I'm going to choose to match on, we'll do company, first name, last name, probably phone. We'll do a whole bunch of them here. And you can click this button and just add them in blank like this, so you can just fill them in. I'm going to save off or hold off on doing my mapping types because we'll just have a longer discussion on that at one fell swoop. All right, first name, and then I choose first name over here. And your fields don't have to be named identically. Mine just happen to be, which is fine, but they don't need to be. It's not going to cause any sort of issues if they aren't. You can, click the letter of that the word begins with that you're looking for to sort of jump through that list a little bit easier. All right, and let's go ahead and add in, we'll do city. All right, we're not going to go over every single mapping type today, just because you're not going to retain every single piece of those definitions. It's almost impossible. But Bubble 6 gives you a link to the help doc that has all the definitions for you. So of course I'm going to reiterate this in my explanations. Feel free to take notes, but the core definitions are listed here with examples. Okay, before we start talking about mapping types, look at the fields that we're matching on and understand that these are ANDed to each other. There is no ORing that goes on here. The ORing is saying, okay, let's look at it this way, or once it's done here, let's go to step 2 and look at it in a different way. So that's where your ORing comes into play. When we match inside of DemandTools, we're always matching all of these fields that you have listed in a path, okay? And by default, we're looking for populated data. So we match populated fields to populated fields by default. We can match a blank field value to a blank field value by enabling the match blank over here on the left. What it will never do, there's not even an option for this, is match a blank field data to a populated field data. So in my spreadsheet, let's say we have a record for me, just because I'm horrible at thinking of examples. And we have, CRM Fusion is my company. We have Olivia, and then my email address, olivia.hinkle@CRM Fusion, my last name, and then my street and my city. And they're all populated with a value in the spreadsheet. In Salesforce, sure, there's a record there for me, but it doesn't have a city. In this duplicate path, or this comparison path, we will not find that match because, remember, in my spreadsheet, all of these fields are populated with a value. In Salesforce, the potential match has all but one field populated. In order for that match to be returned to me, I would have to have another step where I do not use city or whatever the blank field is as a match parameter. Even if I turn on match blank, that still says, okay, fine, we can match the populated field to a populated field and a blank field to a blank field, but we will never match a populated to a blank. Okay? So keep that in mind as you're building your steps. And you can turn on match blank, wherever you see fit to do it. I like doing it on email, especially, and then some of the address stuff, just because for our data, address isn't normally reliable. The match category, don't worry about. It is not going to affect how your data is matched. It is just a filter for the mapping type. So if I have it at all, I see every mapping type we have available. If I change this to alpha, then it only shows me the mapping types meant for alpha fields. Okay, now you can get a little bit clever with some of our mapping types, which is why I don't even mess with the category. Doesn't really help much. For the company and account name matching, the mapping type that I like to use is clean account name. The reason for that is because it's customizable. It references the edit account cleaning list button. And this replace editor, okay, to be clear, the words replace and remove show up here. We are not replacing or removing any of your data. It's just saying for purposes of comparison, we might replace or remove things as we're analyzing it. The replace tab looks anywhere in the string of the value. So if we see a hyphen or a period, a comma, or an apostrophe, we're just ignoring it and seeing it as a blank value. Ampersands and plus signs are seen synonymous to the word and with a space in front and behind. And you can also do word abbreviation substitutions. The word saints can be parsed down and seen as ST. A couple things you should make note of. One, none of these tabs are case sensitive. And two, whenever you're working with a word or words, do not use punctuation. Now, in the replace, if you're going to do a word abbreviation substitution, put the long version on the left and the short abbreviation on the right. And you can see you can customize this for language, locale, business industry, and we certainly encourage you to do that. Not case sensitive, so you don't have to worry about that. And also, you don't have to put in every single punctuation to be ignored. We have this Alpha Clean engine that will do that for you. If you wanted to put more punctuation in here, you can. It won't hurt anything, but to save you time, just clicking that button might be easier. Same sort of things apply here. If you want to add a condition, you'll have an open space always to make additions. And if you want to get rid of something, you click the box to the left and delete on your keyboard. It also does a suffix and a prefix removal. So for instance, if we had a record in my spreadsheet called the CRM Fusion Company, and in Salesforce, it was just called CRM Fusion. We're ignoring the word company. On the prefix, we're ignoring the word the. So now they both are just seen as CRM Fusion. Okay. So that's how this editor is going to help analyze the data. You can enable one of these or all of these engines to help loosen up your mapping type. And the misconception here is that if you have every single one turned on, that's as loose as you can go, and that's not true. It's very dependent on your data. Transpose might work beautifully on my data, but might just give you awful results in yours. It depends on who you do business with and how it's typed in. So it'll be a bit of trial and error as you figure out what is best. Let's talk about what these engines are. The Alpha Clean I alluded to, and that's just going to ignore foreign characters and punctuation. In other words, it will analyze English alphabet letters A through Z and numbers 0 through 9. The Transpose says that the order of the words is irrelevant as long as the words are exactly the same. A record called Salesforce Foundation in my spreadsheet can match to one in Salesforce called Foundation Salesforce. And then lastly, the fuzzy, this is our phonetic or metaphone match. How this works is when it looks at the word, it removes the vowels and then analyzes how the consonants sound when the word's pronounced. Great for picking up spelling mistakes. I think I'm going to set mine up like this with unchecking transpose. Moving down in the list, we have the first name field, and we actually have a first name mapping type. This references the other button here on the right, the Edit Nickname List. And let's say in my spreadsheet, I'm listed as Olivia Hinkle, but then in Salesforce, they have me as Liv Hinkle. You can make abbreviations like that or nicknames match each other. So Tom and Thomas will match, Dave and David, and that's all pre-built in here. You can always scroll through and look. The nickname will be on the left, the full name will be on the right. So if I was going down to the O's, I don't see live, but I could add that. So if I go to the bottom, I could say this is something I need to add. Oh, and it's already there. It must have been up further. So I'll get rid of that. Unless it was at the bottom and I just didn't see it. But it'll let you know if there's duplicates that you're trying to put in. There it is. we won't. Okay, I get it. Ooh, this might be a bug because it's not letting me delete either. All right, hang on one second here. Let me, there we go. Finally let me close it down. Okay, so that's the first name mapping type. Matches the nickname to the long name. For email, I do like using exact. Exact is 100% exact, spelling, spacing, and punctuation. But there are other things that you have available, like domain. So it matches anything to the right of the @ symbol, or relaxed domain. Okay. But on my rigid step, exact seems a bit more appropriate. For last name, I also like using exact, but I like turning on the alpha clean, which will assist in ignoring any hyphenation that might exist in somebody's last name. Mailing streets, we have one called street address match, or relaxed address match. There's two. Built into the street address match, it'll ignore things like the road indicator. So 123 Main Street, 123 Main Ave will still match. N and North will match, W and West, and so on. The number and the spelled out variation, so 1 and ONE, first and 1ST. And then for city, I also like using exact here, but I like turning on the fuzzy and the alpha clean. So in my naming of this step, I can simply list the fields that I'm matching on if I'd like. You can just call it rigid. You don't have to name it at all. It's entirely up to you. So I doubt every piece of my data is going to match this way. I want another step that the data is going to pass through. And for ease of use in creating that, I'm going to click clone. And I have to adjust the name here a little bit. Take it, make it a 2. And in this one, I'm going to get rid of street. And for email, maybe I'll just do the domain. And you don't have to loosen them up this much. Not that this is overly loose, but you know, however you go about it, it could be just changing mapping types and matching on the same fields, or choosing different fields and choosing different mapping types. All right, and we'll take this off. And I'm going to do a third step, and I'm going to get rid of city and email, and I'll just match on company first name and last name. I am okay with those mapping types, but maybe I want to do one step where I just match on email. Okay, so what's going to happen now is the data is going to start here in step 1. We're going to compare all the records and we're going to spit you out results. Then the spreadsheet gets compared again in its entirety to step 2. Again, we'll show you the results. Then it gets compared again in step 3, which I need to adjust my name. We spit you out results, and then the entire data set is once again compared in step 4, and we'll give you the results for what is found there. All right, so every step is given a chance to find a match. If you're used to people import, just to denote the difference here, people import, once it finds a match, it stops comparing. So it's not guaranteed that your data is going to go through every step of comparison. And here, it's different. It is guaranteed that your spreadsheet will be compared in every step in its entirety. Okay, so it's possible that match step 1 could bring you back a match, and maybe match step 4 also matches to the same record. So what we tell you in the results is, here's the total amount of matches that we got, and then here's how many are unique, because it is possible for a step to find a match and then a step after that to find the same match. Okay. Before we move on to the results, any question on what's going on this page? So again, just to recap, we chose the records we were going to compare against, and you don't have to use conditions. You could just use all if you prefer. Expert mode allows you to OR your conditions, And then down at the bottom, we recommend a rigid to loose approach for finding the dupes and, just having a clear understanding of the mapping types that you're using and testing it out, seeing what your results become. Once you're satisfied with this setup, we can go on to step 3, and over on the right, you click Find Matches. And now it starts doing the data comparison. Obviously, the more steps that you have, the longer it's going to take. And there's a lot of things outside of our control and your control in this. Number one, the API traffic. So right now, we're just waiting for Salesforce to pick up the job. When it sits there at 0 out of 100, we're just waiting in line in the API queue to be accepted. And there it goes. Okay, and of course, internet speed and things like that, and the processor on your computer is all going to dictate, how quickly this is rendered. All right. Sorry about that. Something just fell outside my door. When you first come in here, it's going to look like this. There won't be any sorting. And if you remember, I said that we're going to show you total matches, which we have here, and then unique matches. I would group by matches. At least that's how I like to see it, because then I have the data that didn't return any results all grouped together, and I can smush those down. Here's data that returned a total of 1 match, 2 matches, and so on. Okay, but you'll see how this one, I have 4 total matches, only 2 are unique. So if we look at that, I can do that by expanding the plus sign. What's highlighted in blue up top where my cursor is hovering, that's your spreadsheet data. And then what's down below here are the records from Salesforce that we matched to and the step that was responsible for finding that match. You'll notice that step 1, step 2, and step 3 all have this ID that I'm hovering over. So that was 3 matches, but 1 unique match. And then step 3 also matched to this record. Okay, so you can see how there's 4 total matches, 2 that are unique. All right, so if there's duplicates in your data, you're going to see duplicate matches. Obviously, we have tons of duplicates in our data on purpose. All right, so right now, you can sit here in your grid and do some spot checking and make sure that you liked how things were matched. And if you look at, not that one, the match name, it reminds you what fields were matched on, so you don't have to toggle back and forth between the steps to figure that out. The important thing now, though, that we have to figure out is what data do we want to get exported, and then how are we going to accomplish that? You've got your export options on the lower left here, okay? And if you're wondering why there's not numbers that says, okay, there is 36 records that had 0 matches, you got to look at your match report down here too, which is above your export files. And then it breaks it down by step, total matches, unique matches that weren't in a previous step. Okay, so the export file types that you have, we're going to start with a single match per line just because I like that better. And you have some options here to write the first match only. And to be clear, that does not mean write the match that was found in match step 1. It means the first match that was found, regardless of which step, that's the one I want exported to me. All right, so in this case, it is match step 1. There, let's see, can we find one? Match step 1 is doing a good job, darn it. But let's say, match step 2 was the first place a match was found. That record would still be written out. I'm going to uncheck all, and I'm going to work with just one record to show you some examples so you can wrap your head around what is being exported. And maybe it's just me, but this is where I struggled a bit when I first started using this. So this record here, we've got 2 matches, 2 that were unique. Match step 4 was the first match step. If I say write first match only and I have to have the record checked, I'm only going to get this one highlighted. Okay, so this ID is what will be written out to me. I can have in the single match per line a file of my non-matches saved. Now my non-matches are not checked. I could right click and check that group. Okay, but right now I don't want my non-matches. But be aware that if you just wanted non-matches written out, the single match per line is where you're going to find that option. And it will get spit out into its own file. Okay, so here, let me right click and check that group and this record, and we'll do an export. Okay, so first match only. Gives you a link to the data that was matched and then a link to the non-matches. Okay, so non-matches, it's just typical spreadsheet data. Nothing else appended, just here are the records that we couldn't match. The top link, we just chose that one record to export, and starting in column L, that's the stuff that was exported out of DemandTools. All right, so you have, scrolling to the right, this is where the fields of information start being pulled in for the record from Salesforce that matched to my record over here on the left that was in my spreadsheet. All right, so there's the match. Let's go back and let's say I do this next one. It says write all unique matches from first match step. So again, the first step that found the match, write all unique matches. Now this time I'm going to get both of these, all right, because these are unique matches. We're going to not do this non-matches this time. So we'll export. Oops, I didn't mean to click find matches again. Darn it. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, here we go. All right, good. I canceled it. And this is unique matches all steps. Oh, first step. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna have to refine these. Sorry, guys. It I clearly interrupted it midway through and it didn't like that. So for me, if I was an end user, I might make the request that the export data and the find matches button are, you know, a little bit further away from one another. Because if you're like me, I don't get click happy, but I just, you know, I'm over here, so I forget exactly where I'm supposed to be clicking. Don't forget when you're running these things, especially because this takes a lot of time initially to get set up, is save your scenarios so then you don't have to come back in and recreate the wheel every time you want to do one of these. You can, you know, just load up a scenario and maybe do some minor tweaks to it. I really hose my machine doing that. All right, hang on a second, guys. My poor machine was struggling anyway, and then I throw this at it, and it's not too thrilled with me. We're just going to go ahead and end that. And I'll just reload. No, I didn't save that exact scenario, but I have another one saved, and I'll just load up and use that one. Also, if you're wondering why you're not seeing a login screen on mine, it's because I do have auto login enabled. All right, so if you do load a save scenario, first thing you've got to do is load your file, and then you click load scenario. You don't have to choose the object or anything like that. Just get your file loaded, and then click your load scenario button. If you're loading a scenario that's looking for fields that you're not giving it in the spreadsheet, it'll give you that little pop-up and say, okay, these fields don't exist. Are you okay with me taking them out? And then you can make whatever modifications. So this is pretty similar to what I had. Let's just refine those matches. The next example we run through after we finish talking about these export options, I'm going to show you how to do a comparison when you just have the IDs. All right, so we were doing all unique matches from first match step, and in this case it would just be this one record, okay, which I don't think we need to write that out. If you want me to, I will though. The one I do want to show you is the all unique matches from all match steps. So this should still only write out 2 records. Okay, so it's going to grab this one, and then it's also going to grab this one. All right, if you guys want me to continue showing the exports, I absolutely will. I think just pointing out which records though might help you. Now, I do want to do one where we're going to have multiple records because I want you to see what it looks like on the single match per line. And this is all matches, all steps. It would be helpful if I checked off a record. There we go. Now, in my spreadsheet, this record was just one line item. Because I said, all right, if there's multiple matches, write them all out, it's putting them on separate lines. That's what the single match per line is indicating. So it's possible for one record in your spreadsheet, if you're exporting multiple matches for it, to show up as 2 records on your resulting spreadsheet, because each match is put on its own row. Okay, and it tells you which step and then the ID. Now, when we do the multiple match per line, there's some caveats here. Number one is the amount of records you're allowed to spit out with this one. So in the single match per line, there's really no limit except for the limit placed on us by the file type. So if there's 30 matches for a record, you can write out all 30. In the multiple matches per line, because the data is not put on its own row when there's more than one match, it's put in its own set of columns further to the right, you are only allowed to write out up to a maximum of 10 matches per record. Okay, so the options here, they say write all unique matches from first match step up to a maximum. This is your maximum. Okay, there's not the option to just write the first match only. So again, the all unique matches from first match step, I would just get this one record here that's highlighted. If I did all unique matches from all match steps, I would get both records. Now, if my maximum was set to 1, I would still just get 1 record. Okay, but I'm going to show you what it looks like with 2. Well, actually, let's do 3, even though we only have 2 unique, and I'll show you why. Multiple match per line. So in this one, we have multiple matches, but this is our spreadsheet data, right? These columns all the way over till L. And then here's our first match. Scrolling further to the right, here's our second match. See the headers? Match 2. And then I set up to a maximum of 3. This one didn't have 3, but it's still going to give me the headers, even though the data below it is going to be blank. And then after 3, it ends. Okay, so depending on what you're going to do with this information will most likely dictate the order in which you, or the manner in which you export it. You can export it, every way you want based on the options here. Clearly, you're allowed to do multiple exports for one data set. There has not been a single question, which is okay, but if you guys have them, let me know. And of course, if you want to save your scenario, it will save your export options, including if you append the date and time, which you need to notice is on both options. All right, so save. And then it's back in my list of saved scenarios. Now, where you save your scenarios is up to you, but I've made a folder under my documents in the DemandTools data folder, which we'll all have, and I just put one in for find IDs, which you too can add that folder if you want. All right, let's clear this out. Yeah, we'll clear it out. I'm still going to use this file, but I'm going to use this portion of my file. So I just double click that piece of the spreadsheet, and this time I'm going to compare against my leads because the IDs I have in there, that's why I noted 00Q, so I knew that they were lead IDs. So all I have in my spreadsheet now is a list of IDs that somebody said, I need the supporting data that goes with these. Luckily for me, I know that the first 3 characters of an ID are indicative of what object type it is. So I say, all right, let's compare to the lead, and we'll bring back pertinent information. Email, first name, last name, company, you know, the same sort of stuff that we'd want to see with a contact. And we'll do phone and street and state. Now, when you're doing a comparison against leads, it's always going to populate with this is converted equals false. You technically don't need it anymore because it's a coding we've done in the background. It's still there, no harm, no foul if you leave it, but if you take it off, it shouldn't matter either. You know, if you just wanted to do use all, which is basically what this is saying, all but converted. When I'm matching and all I have is an ID to match on, and I'm talking Salesforce ID here, okay, the mapping type most people want to use is exact, and that is not correct because Salesforce IDs can come in 2 different flavors. You've got the 15-digit and the 18-digit. And in order, let's say maybe you have the 18-digit in your spreadsheet, you know, or the 15-digit in some and the 18-digit in others, that's not a problem. Just use the Salesforce.com ID match, and that allows for the 15-digit to match properly to the 18 and vice versa, and there's no issues there. So that's an important piece to remember. If you're matching on the Salesforce ID, use the Salesforce.com ID match. Now this should return one-to-one matches, okay, because no record in Salesforce shares the same Salesforce ID. And while this is processing, just again, a reminder for those of you who jumped on a little bit later, you will be getting a survey after the training session. If you have the time and you can fill it out, that'd be great. And thank you guys for joining today. We only have, you know, like 5-6 minutes left, but we appreciate that you guys take advantage of these free training sessions because we feel that if you're informed, you're happy users. And, you know, obviously it's easier to do your job using our tools if you know how to use them. We do have multiple training sessions. You're allowed to attend every single one multiple times if you'd like. All right, so here's a list that didn't find a match. Here's my list that did. And see how it's zeros or ones. Okay, now here is the extra data. So all I had in my spreadsheet was that ID, and now I can say, well, here's the same ID in Salesforce, and here's the underlying pieces of information that correspond. Right, sometimes people will say, well, I have a list of accounts, their IDs, but I need to get a report of every single contact associated to that account. You can do that. So if we have, let me grab a spreadsheet that has account IDs. Do I have one? I think I deleted my file. Let's see here. But when you're going to do something like that, where the information you have is from a related object, yeah, these aren't IDs. The way it would work, and we're just going to pretend that I have the right IDs here. I'll grab a different file. How you would set this up is, you know, we'll pretend that we have the account IDs, but you want to bring back contact data. So you have to compare it to the contact table. And we can do that because of the master detail relationship between accounts and contacts. So what I'm going to say is find me any contacts and bring me back. We're just going to grab some random stuff here. Bring me back the contacts that match to this account ID. So we compare against the contact table, and how we would do it is we're going to pretend here that this city field is my ID field. So that is your account ID in the input column, and we would compare it to the account ID in Salesforce. So what that means basically is if the account ID in my spreadsheet matches the account ID on a contact, bring that contact information back to me. Okay, I know it's a bit easier to wrap your mind around if you can see it, but I inadvertently deleted my file, I think. Let's see if this one. Oh, here it is. It was on my other desktop. Here, let's load up that guy so you can see it. And we've gone through all the detail of find IDs and all the best practices. I just want to show you this one because this is something people do a lot. Okay. And this time I am going to compare against all of my contacts. I could still subset if I wanted to. Clearly, I keep selecting the wrong file. Why is that? And you'll notice I keep choosing less and less fields as I'm doing this. There it is. So that goes to the account ID. And just to speed this up, we're going to do only compare to accounts where the billing state is in Ohio. Well, technically what that is saying, only compare against contacts where its associated account is in Ohio. All right, so for these guys, this account only has one contact, okay? This set of accounts has two contacts. So this is the account ID, and here's your contact ID. So if I go there, and I look at the account in Salesforce, so this is the contact. Let me go to the account level. Contacts, I've got two. All right, so you can see how it's pulling out a comprehensive list, and it's just saying, if the contact and account have the ID in common, then we'll show you how many records there are, and we'll show you exactly what the records are. All right, so that's the last example we're going to do today. I know we only have about a minute left. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to stick around and answer those if you'd like. Otherwise, again, thank you for joining the session. Have a great weekend. And if I don't see anything pop up here in the next minute or so, I'll probably just end the webinar. I see somebody raise their hand. Like I said, we're all muted. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. Where can I find the video? So if you want the video, you have to request it. You can either go to our website, which is crmfusion.com, click on the support link, and then open a technical case, or on the front screen of DemandTools when you log in, go to the tech support, and then log your case here, and just ask for the video from today. Awesome. You're welcome. All right, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll hope to see you in another session. Bye-bye.